Gene's son, and my gifts are more in writing than in public speaking. So I'm going to be reading my speech this morning. I'd like to begin by extending, along with my mom and family, a sincere welcome and thank you to all of you for coming today to remember my dad, by expressing our deep gratitude and sincere thank you to those of you who drove here today and have had us in our prayers. I'd like to also welcome again my brother-in-law Cliff, my sister Camille from Florida, and their two children who are not here today but with us in spirit, Jack and Kathy, whom he's mentioned. Of course, my sister Vicky are here with her three daughters, and starting with the starting lineup, you've already met Stacy, her daughter Heidi, and Lauren. Along in tow with them are Jean and Bernice's 8 great-grandchildren and 2+ great-great-grandchildren. Also today present are my wife's, my dad's brother Russ, his wife Pat, and I'd like to mention everyone by name, all your relatives and friends, but if I did that, then lunch would get cold, and that would not make my dad very happy. Okay. I'm also very pleased to bring along my wife, Margaret, from Philadelphia, and my best friend from grade school, Scott Campbell from Laval, Quebec, who will be delivering our message shortly. And Scott will explain his connection with my dad when he speaks. You may also know, those of you who are members of this church, Scott is the son, or what is the son of the late Craig and Enid Campbell, who were members of this church for many years. Thank you too for Pastor Ben and Greg and David for participating in our service this morning. It's never easy to sum up a life, but I'd like to share with you my perspective of Gene, my dad. Here are some of the deep and lasting impressions that are etched into my memory. You'll be reminded, as you saw or later see again the photographs of him today, he had a beaming smile, one that radiated, and with eyes that glistened. He was very much a people person who loved to talk, sometimes more than he liked to listen. He enjoyed others and would engage people from all walks of life, young or old, rich or poor, known or unknown. He took people at face value and did not like to think of himself as better than anyone else. And if there was ever anything between you and him, he would want to make it right away, as Stacy shared earlier. Some of you might have even received a letter from him. He was quite a letter writer, and you've read those he's written to the paper. As I've heard expressed before, he cared enough to confront, and he did it out of love. Dad was a man of action in many respects. I look at all he did and accomplished and am amazed at his level of energy and productivity over the years. One memory of him kind of sums it up for me. He's cutting plywood with me in the garage with his circular saw, sawdust all over the place, sweat dripping from his nose and chin, blurring and burning his eyes, and yelling at me to get ready to catch the scrap of plywood that was about to fall off the sheet. And I often heard his instructional words, "Anticipate, son, anticipate." He laid a lot of foundational teaching in my life, and we know that there is more caught than taught. Dad was a hard worker, and he taught me the value of honest, hard work, whether it was cutting wood, hammering a nail, cutting grass, making a movie, presenting myself to a potential employer, or being faithful to my work and family, and doing the best I could with the resources and time available. There was no work that was beneath him. He did it all, from digging our basement room addition and porch addition one shovel at a time, to helping his kids and grandkids move furniture with whatever vintage Lincoln or Cadillac he happened to own at the time. Rent a truck, what for? We moved in style. For years while growing up, a washer and dryer was not a financial priority in our family, mainly because he remodeled our utility room into a den, and we sort of lost the laundry room. So he and I would frequently buddy up and do the laundry together at the local laundromat one of the weeknights Mom worked later hours. We had our routine, we got the job done. Here's a quick aside. I told Dad I wanted my jeans to look faded like all the other kids at my high school. So he throws in the jeans and pours in the Clorox bleach after them. And out comes this marbly maze of blue and white denim jeans. They turned a few heads at school, but I didn't care that they were different. I love those jeans. They were one of Dad's creations. As you've heard, Dad was a proud father and grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great. Boy, that was significant what you shared there, Stacy. Thank you. I have vivid impressions of his beaming smile whenever he would introduce me to someone or reconnected me with someone from Keystone Steel and Wire where he worked. He loved to see his kids succeed, and he did so much to help us, spend time with us in special school projects, support us in various associations like Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, Little League, art lessons, high school plays, filmmaking, competitions, you name it. And if we didn't do it so well, that was okay too. We were never belittled for failure. Both he and my mom were always so supportive. Christmas and birthdays were always very special occasions. My parents let us know how much they loved us. It was a secure family and a loving family to grow up in. People could see we were close, and they would sometimes comment. Dad was also my movie-making collaborator during college. He was my co-writer and executive producer on one of my more serious college projects, which starred pretty much my whole family, including my brother-in-law and sister. My mom and sisters were in it. Other family members, and my dad's co-workers too. I think one of them, Pete, is here. Anyway, he was my location scout, and he built things like camera dollies, car mounts for movie cameras. He was involved, and he loved it. I credit my dad and my mom too for fostering my earliest interest in still photography and filmmaking. In 1968, Dad took me on a school night, I remember distinctly, to see 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film which grew into an obsession of mine that has lasted most of my life. And you have no idea, really. I still remember Dad's joy in giving me a letter I received from the book's author Arthur C. Clarke, who was the collaborator with its director, Stanley Kubrick. And then he helped me. I'm departing from my speech here, but I was trying to find photographs from the author to make a spaceship replica from the movie. And I wrote the author, he wrote this back to me, and I even went to the theater and shot 35 millimeter slides of the screen, I'm sure, which completely drove the patrons crazy. But Dad, he picked up the process slides for me from the photo store, and there must have been hundreds. He commented about the cost, but he never chided me about my obsession. And while attempting to construct my own hand-built model of one spaceship from the movie, Dad found a custom woodworking shop in Peoria who built the shapes that constructed the midsection of the film, which were beyond his capabilities with the tools we had, at the time. But he was willing to pay the man as long as I stopped bugging him. Those kinds of examples of his dedication and love abound with my sisters and his grandkids, and my mom, of course. He enjoyed supporting the talents, hopes, and life ambitions of his family. He was a giver, and he poured himself out for others. Dad's main working years were through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, some amazing times in our country and world's history. He loved to talk politics, sports, current events, and even understood the importance of taking his kids with my mom to see the Beatles in Chicago in 1965. He couldn't have given a hoot about seeing the Beatles, but he knew how much his daughters did, and later his son would be able to brag about it as well. And he did it in style, driving us to Chicago in our 1960 Cadillac with fins, and wearing a suit to the rock concert, which was at White Sox Park. That's what they did in those days. He enjoyed contemporary culture, jazz, the big bands, Sinatra, Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, and he might have indulged somewhat heavily at times. He loved a great cut of prime rib, a good drink, and just a too many smokes, which he finally quit cold turkey about 15 years ago. Bless his heart. And after that, he couldn't stand to be around cigarette smoke. So he finally got it. He loved life and all the abundance we have, but he was also a very spiritual man, if you've heard. He loved Jesus since childhood, and he would often tell the following story, which I will now attempt to read, but I think given the time, I'm going to just summarize it for you. Dad grew up during a time of life when, you know what, I'm just going to read this. It's short. Here we go. I'm cautious of this because I had to go ahead and add commas and all kinds of spaces in this because he wasn't a great believer in commas. I tried to help him with that. He calls this not just another Christmas story. This story takes place during a time when beans were selling for a nickel a bushel and doctors were still making house calls. Just when the Great Depression hit this young family, he's referring to his own family, the hardest, they were ready to receive another blow from a serious illness. Only a month earlier, his father and grandfather had made plans to supplement the family income by delivering coal to downtown merchants, a bushel at a time, from the tiny truck bed of an old Model T. They would buy on consignment a gondola of lump coal. The railroad would place the car on the siding near downtown, and they would have a week to unload the coal, deliver, collect the money, and pay the broker who generously made the arrangements. A small profit for their labors covered the needs of this 3-day work week, which is the only thing they could do in those days at his dad's factory. This would have been their fourth winter of hard, cold labor. They carried on night after night without a whimper, but that would change quickly. The firstborn child of the family had just turned 5, 3 months earlier, and his baby brother was only 4 months old. The 5-year-old, Dad referring to himself here, seemed to have picked up a cold or something from his kindergarten class. His condition worsened in just a day or two. He was taken to the family doctor, who immediately identified his condition as scarlet fever, a highly contagious illness very difficult to treat without the wonder drugs of more modern times, and it required that the entire household be quarantined for the duration of the illness. An ugly black and red quarantine notice was nailed on the front of the home by a city health department official. No one except a doctor could enter or leave the house. The entire family was held in bondage by this horrible illness. Daily, the good doctor would come, examine, and leave, knowing with each passing day the young child's condition would worsen until the high fever would break. Aspirin and lots of liquid were just about all the young doctor was able to prescribe, along with the frequent application of a wet, cold compress to help the body heal. As days and weeks passed, food and other needs of this young family were replenished with the help of neighbors, friends, and family. They would come to the window of the little boy's bedroom. His father or mother would place the money on the windowsill, pour alcohol and hot water on the money, hopefully to kill any germs the Good Samaritans feared. They would then go and buy the food and other needs and bring them back to the same window. And this went on for weeks with a steady stream of helpful volunteers. Can you imagine? It just blows my mind. Early on, the little boy would respond to greetings and words of encouragement from those on the other side of the window. With each passing day, however, his response would be of shorter duration as his fever drained his strength. Sadly, the doctor's prognostication was not encouraging. However, he had good news to report on the little boy's brother, whose cold had improved and he had not contracted scarlet fever. Just about a week before Christmas, the doctor told the parents that the fever had weakened the child's resistance to infection, and the swelling of the glands in the child's neck would reduce his airways to such an extent he would suffocate. If that did not happen, it was likely that the fever would severely affect other vital organs, and as they shut down, he would perish as his system would poison itself. The doctor discussed one untried procedure with the parents. He wanted to lance their little son's neck, hopefully to drain the pus, which had expanded the neck to such an extent it was not possible to distinguish the line of the chin and jaw from the neck. Parents had no choice but to yield to the only option left to the doctor and to pray that his skills would be rewarded with success in the survival of their little son. The doctor prepared the area of the neck he was to lance and deftly cut a small but deep incision about 2 inches below the child's right ear. And I'll spare some of the details at this point, but suffice it to say, after that was all he could do, and it was now time to wait and watch for change. The doctor stayed until late that evening. The compresses were kept hot and changed frequently. The child's temperature, which had been at 104 for several days, started to drop at about 1 degree each hour. As the thermometer reached 100, the little boy opened his eyes and asked for water. The doctor was cautiously optimistic and told the parents the next 24 hours would be critical. He left with assurance he would return the next morning. Near midnight, his father and mother kept vigilance with their little son. Their little son turned his head toward them and said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine if you play the record Silent Night." And it would have been a 78 RPM record. Stunned, after days of nothing but silence or meaningless mutterings from their highly fevered son, they broke down. Their sobs were interrupted by the hand of the little son reaching out to them. As he touched them again, he said, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Jesus is taking care of me. Just keep playing Silent Night." They cranked that old Victrola all night long and played that record countless times. Sleep did not come to either of them, but the child seemed to fall into a deep sleep, with his breathing becoming more normal as his fever subsided. With the dawn came the doctor's promised return. He was astounded as the little boy turned his head toward him and with a feeble smile and a soft whisper said, "Good morning, doctor. Jesus took care of me through the night." Clearly, this was not just another Christmas story, but then again, maybe it was. I was that little boy, and Jesus is still my best friend and comforter. I owe him so much, yet I have not been the friend to him he deserves. But he forgives me, and I will try to do better. I know he is faithful and understands. That is a sample of my simple faith. Yes, I still come to him as a child. Margaret Claudin, written December 23rd, 2003. And then he, I don't know when he wrote this, but this is just a short prayer he wrote. Praise to you, my Lord, and thank you for this life. You breathed the breath of life into me when I first emerged from my mother's womb, and again when all had done their utmost to treat my illness with crude, unproven methods. My comfort was from the phrases of a simple song about the virgin birth of a little baby. That baby, your son, Jesus Christ, was sent to deliver all mankind from death with your promise of rebirth in a life everlasting. Through that night of many years past, the notes and words gave promise of a brighter morning to follow a crisis within my frail body. As a child, my faith was untested and hardly understood, but I knew you were there with my family as that song was played over and over through the night at my request. Somehow I must understand and not question your reasons for sparing my life at that young age, and many times as the years wore on. Yes, sparing not only my mortal life, but my spiritual life as well as you have, through your Son, Jesus Christ, who forgave my sins, offending you. For shame, I'm unworthy of such care from you. My life is yours, dear Lord. Guide me with your Spirit. Praise thee evermore. In Christ's name, Jean Claudin. Well, that's a glimpse of my dad from my point of view. We've heard other viewpoints today, and I'm sure you all have yours as well. We can all agree that he was a great man, not a perfect or completed man. Like each of us, he was a work in progress. But that's all past now. He's a finished work now in the presence of his Creator, his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, whom he loved. Dad and I were very close and quite different at the same time. He understood God's calling on my life, and he never interfered with that. But we deeply loved and respected one another. Of course, he would want us all to do the same. Amen.